Hello, everybody. I know it's a week at no, it's been a little while since we've at last had a good video, so it's been since I think Halloween. Last week I did post our Veterans Day little tribute with the World War One little slideshow, but that was not an actual video. But anyway, hopefully everyone is doing well. But let's go ahead and talk here. Um, I'm coming in today for kind of a start video of a series that I've kind of decided I want to cover. Now, this will not be a continuous in a row series. This will kind of be when we have the chance to discuss and continue on it, we will. And it's something very related to what just happened 2 weeks ago. I'm sure everyone kind of knows what's going on in the field of politics right now. Even if you're not really paying attention to what the Congress is doing, I'm pretty sure that 2 weeks ago you were probably pretty glued to your TV screens or your phones and probably were watching the 2020 presidential election. Now, I am not going to sit here and debate with you and talk with you and discuss all the madness that is going on right now over this election. I don't even want to get into that. However, the election really brought into mind something that I feel needed to be addressed, something that I feel I needed to possibly do to try to help people understand about the presidents better. And this was the common factor that most people do not know their presidents of the United States. They might know a few. Like, for example, most people will know two presidents almost outright. They will know George Washington and they will know Abraham Lincoln. And odds are you might know a couple others. You might know Thomas Jefferson, probably, JFK, or John F. Kennedy, as we would call him. Maybe Franklin and Teddy Roosevelt, you might know them. And of course, you'd probably know who your current president was. Like, for example, right now it's Donald Trump. If it was, let's see here, 8 years ago, it was Barack Obama. If it was in the 90s, it was Bill Clinton. I'm not even going to get into the topic of what we're going to be looking at here come January because that's still in heavy debate. I mean, I know what I personally think, but I'm not going to get political here on what my political views are. So you are entitled to your opinion. But anyway, came to the realization that most Americans, most people don't exactly know their presidents. They don't exactly know how many we've had. They don't know uh, who exactly has been it. They don't even really know what each one maybe accomplished that was significant for the country. And as I thought about this, I kind of came to the conclusion that I think we're going to go ahead here and do a series. We're going to cover all of the presidents that have ever become president of the United States. So right now we're talking 45 men, and I'm going off facts here. I'm not going off my personal preference, but according to most news sources, it is projected we will have a 46 in January, but that is up for debate. You can see what people believe on that. But according to news sources, according to actual institutions that are calling presidential elections, we supposedly will have a 46th president. I am not going to go ahead and argue that yet. I'm not even going to argue that at all because that's just a mess. Anyway, so far we have had 45 men, 45 counting the man who is currently in the White House now. And we have had all these 45 men that have been president, and most people don't exactly know most of them. So what I'm going to do with this upcoming series here is we're going to have a video on each of those people. This is why I'm saying we're not doing this in a row. We're going to space this out. This is going to be over a year-long project, probably. We're going to go through these men, what they accomplished, and we will devote a single video each. Unless the president is important enough, we may devote two, and we will discuss exactly how that man became president, because so far there has not been a woman. We will discuss how did they become president, and what did they do as president that was their accomplishments, or what was their big failures. Were they a failure at all in office? And we've had a couple. We've had quite a few that were actually failures. So we will discuss the presidents, and it's also a good way to really kind of look at American history because you would be, as you go through the presidents, you're going through the American history, basically. So I am also planning that if we if we go for a president and there was a major historical event in American history that happened during that president's term that we have not covered in some form in some previous video, I will go ahead and take a pause during the time that we're covering that, and we will have a separate video on that topic then to kind of include it there. So as we go along, we'll also be covering important historical events in American history as well. I feel this is kind of needed because most people don't know the presidents, and I think they need to be. You need to at least know the ones on your currency. And I'm sad to say this, but I've tried this out with many people that I know. Many of them cannot tell me who is on their currency. You deal with money every day, and you can't even tell me who. That's sad. But I'm not going to say it's their fault. It's their educators' fault. It's America's fault because we don't teach our citizens history. We don't teach our citizens what they truly probably need to look at a little bit more. We kind of ignore it. All we're consumed about in America is money, 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 and money. That's all we're mostly concerned about anymore. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and cover this. But as for this very first little video, I want this to be a little more than just an introduction. I want it to be a topic starter. And for this video, I just simply want to go over, I deem that it's not enough to simply go over each president one at a time, but it's probably likely that we need to address what exactly is a president? What does the president do? What is his responsibilities? Why is he there? So I would like to also, as starting now, of course, we're going to go ahead and we're going to discuss what exactly the role of president is. What does the president do? What are his powers? What responsibilities does the president have? And then from there on, we will continue with our presidents down the road as we go along with them. And of course, occasionally we will take breaks, but I just wanted to go ahead and get this kind of announced and out there before we really got into it. So anyway, we're going to go ahead here and let's discuss what exactly the office of the president is. Now, the office of the president was created in Article 2 of the Constitution. If you ever read the Constitution, which I also heavily implore that you need to probably do at some point in your life, you will find this in Article 2. It was written in the Constitution reminder was written in 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania during the summer by the delegates, including George Washington, who of course later became our very first president, and we will discuss him either at the end of this week or next week as our very first video on a president. Because we're going to do this in numerical order. So, like, for example, Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, they're going to be the last ones that we cover. So we're going to go ahead here and discuss what exactly they do. So, as we mentioned, it's established in Article 2 of the Constitution. Now, the president is deemed in the Constitution to be the head of the executive branch. This is the branch of the government. There are three branches. There's legislative, executive, and judicial. The executive branch is in charge of enforcing the laws of the land. It's in charge of enforcing laws that Congress or the legislative branch passes. The president is the head of the executive branch. Now, the Constitution really only sets three qualifications that someone must have in order to be president. And these are the three qualifications. In order to become president, an individual must be at least 35 years old. An individual must have been born in the U.S. They must be a naturally born U.S. citizen. They cannot have immigrated here. They must have been born here. And as a final condition, they must have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. These are really the only thing. There's nothing in there that says a woman cannot become president. There's nothing in there that says many people can't become president, but we act like that. There's nothing in there that says, for example, that a rich guy is the only people that can become a president. That's not true. There's nothing in that. In fact, I want to kind of touch on that. For all these people that maybe they discuss the president, and then someone says, well, I want to run for president. And then they kind of explain their belief, and then some people bring up this argument. They'll bring up an argument. If someone brings up that they want to run for president, his opponents or his critics might say, well, you got to spend a lot of money. You got to be like rich. You got to go into government. You got to have political experience. Not true. And we will see that as we go through this journey. I want to make that very clear. You do not have to have political experience to become president. You do not have to be rich to become president. In fact, we will name a couple of examples right now. Andrew Jackson, Zachary Taylor, for example. Both these men were soldiers, but they were never politicians prior to becoming president. Another very good modern example, of course, would be Donald Trump. Donald Trump was never a politician before he became president. He was a businessman, but he was never a politician. Now, he was rich, but he was not a politician. Now, let's look at some non rich people. And let's look here, if I'm looking. Jimmy Carter was not rich when he ran for president initially, not explicitly. Andrew Jackson was not rich. Who else here? I'm trying to think. Abraham Lincoln was not rich. There. I just can't name a whole bunch top of my head because I haven't really looked in the rich part. But the point being, you do not have to be rich. You don't have to be a politician to be president. All you got to do is be 35. You have to have been born here, and you must have lived here for 14 years. In fact, I would also go ahead and state this that by stating that for some, if you're going to be one of those people that states that you got to be rich, you got to be a politician, you're kind of undermining the whole ideal of American democracy because American democracy dictates that you can come to this land and you can set your dream and you can achieve that dream no matter what. That anybody can become president, anybody can become a leader. Well, if you say, oh no, you got to be rich, you got to be a politician, that kind of undermines that whole statement. But anyway, the president, of course, is not related, elected by the people. This probably comes as the biggest shocker to most people, is that the president is not directly elected by the U.S. Population. He is, in fact, elected for the institution that is established in the Constitution known as the Electoral College, which, if you watched the presidential election 2 weeks ago, you probably have been kind of understand or learning a little bit about the Electoral College if you have not already understood it. Where in the Electoral College, it's a system of electors that are chosen by each state. Each state gets a certain number of electors based on their representation in Congress. So, for example, I live here in the state of Ohio. We have 16 representatives in the House, and we have 2 senators, just like every other state, in the Senate. So 16 plus 2 is 18. We have 18 electoral votes in the Electoral College. Or California is another one. California has the most of any state with 55 electoral votes. So California, that means California would have, let me think here, 53 representatives in the House and 2 senators. Every state has 2 senators regardless. The minimum a state will have is 3, which is 2 senators and 1 representative due to their population. Now, the Electoral College, each state has a different number of electoral votes. Whoever wins the popular vote, the actual vote of the majority of the actual people in that state, is awarded that state's electoral votes. And then those electors then cast their vote as dictated by what their state decides, not based on their personal preference, in December, and that officially will determine the election by whoever is the first candidate to win a majority of those electoral votes, which today is the number of 270. So, like, if you watched a couple weeks ago, you would have noticed, like, because, let's say here, Donald Trump won the popular vote here in my state of Ohio. He won Ohio's 18 electoral votes. Or here's an example. What's another one here? Because Joe Biden won the popular vote in California, he got California's electoral votes. So that's how the Electoral College works. Now, of course, there is a whole debate raging around that, whether or not it's exactly democratic. In myself, I believe we just need to have a popular vote. I kind of don't deem it's the best democratic system. It's kind of outdated. It may have once served a purpose, but I think it's kind of served its purpose and needs to just be replaced or gotten rid of entirely. So that's up for debate. But anyway, that is how a president is typically elected. Now, what exactly are the powers for a president? This is what we mainly want to cover. What exactly does the president do? The president, first and foremost, the president acts as our commander in chief. He acts as our supreme kind of commander over the military, over the Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marines. He acts as the commander in chief, the big main guy in charge of them all. No one tells him what to do. He makes this ultimate decision. And the president is really in charge of the military in times of war. He is the main leader of the army, not just in war, but he's the main leader of the army during peacetime as well. However, the president, while he can prosecute a war, he can direct the troops and the military during a war, the president does not have the power to declare war. That power belongs to Congress. Congress is the only body that can declare war, and on top of that, the president cannot ratify a treaty. The president can sign a treaty, but then that treaty must be approved with ratification from the Senate by a two-thirds majority vote. It's part of the system of checks and balances that we have here in America, what kind of limits each branch from becoming too powerful than another. So, first and foremost, the president is our supreme commander of the military. He's basically our main top general, in a way. The president also appoints people as the head of several and many federal agencies and departments, and these are known as the presidential cabinet. Now, these people, which today I think number almost 30 or so, back when George Washington became president, there was only 4 presidential cabinet members. Now, today, it's like almost 30, if not more than 30. And anyway, the people that that the president chooses to be the heads of each individual federal agency or department serve in his cabinet, such as Attorney General's one, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Education, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury. These are all cabinet positions. These people act as advisors to the president on making policy in each of these departments, as these advisors kind of know about their department that they serve in. They're kind of specialists in their own little department that they're in charge of. They actually know that department because they themselves are involved. And they act as an advisor of sorts to the president, because the president, let's face it, the president's not always going to be a banker and know everything about how to release and about inflation and stuff like that. So it might be very good to have a Secretary of the Treasury that maybe has some experience in finances and kind of explain to the president, okay, if we do this, this will happen. If we do this, this will happen. They can kind of better explain it to the president. They're not making the decisions. They take their orders from the president, but they act as an advisor to try to help him make a better, more educated decision. Because it's no guy's going to get elected into the presidency, or woman, that is going to know every single little thing. They're going to need help somewhere. So anyway, that is the presidential cabinet. Now, the Senate, the president cannot just appoint cabinet members willy-nilly. He cannot just choose his best friend and say, okay, you're going to be my Secretary of the Treasury, done deal. No. The president can nominates his cabinet members, but each of these appointees must be approved by the Senate. The Senate must approve the president's appointees to his cabinet to ensure that someone eligible and someone decent in that department is going to be in charge. You can't just be your personal friend that's you know all your life that has. You can't just put your personal friend in charge of the Department of Education when he has no experience working in the educational field. That doesn't even make sense. The president also appoints the heads of many federal commissions and is also in charge of appointing federal judges to courts, such as the Supreme Court. The president can nominate judges to different federal courts. Of course, recently we had Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg die, and because of this, President Trump exercised his constitutional right over. Of course, there is debate over that. I'm just doing it as what the Constitution says he can do. And by law, the president, which Trump did, he nominated a Supreme Court justice to replace her. But Trump, for example, Trump could not just say, "Okay, I nominate her; she's on the court." No, the president has to nominate. But again, the Senate acts as the checks and balances, and the Senate must confirm that nomination to the court. If the Senate rejects it, the president can't have that nominee up there. They're going to have to pick someone else. The cabinet members may also add the cabinet members of the presidential cabinet also are marked in line of presidential succession should the president become incapacitated in an event of death, be it he dies in office, be it he gets assassinated, be it he's sick, or be it he fails to complete his term because he resigns, maybe. And in that case, in the line of presidential succession, should any of those things happen, the first in line is the vice president, then the Speaker of the House, then the president pro tempore of the Senate, and then it goes down, starts going through the list of cabinet members. Should those people all be eliminated? Now, the president also acts as a check on Congress. So far, we've discussed that the Congress kind of acts as a check on the president. And this was thoroughly done because when they formed the Constitution, when they framed it, the founders really were coming up with a bold idea here because at the time, we were the only democratic republic in the world. And on top of that, no one in the world, no nation had a office that was comparable to the office of the presidency that they had just created. Most countries in the world at that time had monarchies. They had kings, they had queens. They didn't have something called a president. So the United States was really the first nation to really come up with the office of a president, and they were the first ones to really define what exactly that office was. So, anyway, the president also acts as a check on Congress. Now, what can the president do? The president does two main things. As we mentioned, the president can enforce laws, and the president can officially sign laws into effect. Congress, when they pass a proposed law, it's called a bill. The bill is then sent to the president. If the president decides to sign the bill with his signature, that bill is now a law, and it must be enforced by the correct department that it applies to. However, the president, if he does not agree with the bill, if he does not like the proposal, he can reject it by issuing a veto. One of the president's primary powers is a veto or rejection. He can say, nope, I don't approve. Veto. And the bill is rejected and sent back to Congress. It does not become law. However, as further part of the checks and balances system, Congress can override a presidential veto. However, they can only do this if a two-thirds majority in each house votes to overturn the president's veto. A two-thirds majority in each house must vote in favor of overturning the veto. If two-thirds in the Senate vote to do it and they fail to get two-thirds in the House, well, that bill's dead. Now, the president also acts as a kind of a what would be here mercy player to say it bluntly, and that is the fact that the president is responsible. That the president can issue pardons, he can grant clemencies for anybody that has committed a crime, unless in the case of a state or federal impeachment, he cannot do it then. But he can but the president can officially grant pardons and he can grant clemencies to anyone that's committed a crime. So say someone's on death row that has committed a crime and all of a sudden they're scheduled to be executed the next day, and the president the day before issues, okay, this guy is officially pardoned by me for any crimes that he committed. Instead of being executed, that guy is now free. He's been formally forgiven of any crimes that he may have done. Now, the president cannot pardon himself. That is against the law. There is no way that the president is allowed to pardon himself. In that case, if that happened, think of just the chaos that would ensue, because that's like saying, okay, I'm supremely powerful, I know I did wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and forgive myself anyway. You can't really forgive yourself. That's not really legal. Now, the president can also issue executive orders. Now, what is an executive order? An executive order is basically an order that is given by the president that allows him to control several or one of the different cabinet members or executive branch members, but he does not have to get the congressional approval for this. Usually, as we've said, that Congress must confirm something or they must get involved and formally okay it. In this case, if the president issues an executive order, he does not need this congressional approval to take charge in the executive branch over multiple executive branch members. However, there is one branch that can overturn an executive order, and that is not the legislative in this case. In this case, if an executive order is filed, the judicial branch is the one that can actually overturn this, and that is in the form of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does have the power to overturn and end an executive order. Now, the president also has this power, but the Supreme Court is the other one that has this power as well, to act as a check on the presidency. Now, the president also, what is very important to note here is something that this was not explicitly stated in the Constitution, but it started in George Washington's presidency. as it, and it evolved to become a norm for the presidency, and that was the president is typically the one in charge of foreign policy. Foreign policy is not dictated by Congress, it is dictated by the president. Now, the Constitution does not state this responsibility to anybody. So when George Washington was uh, elected as our first president, it was really uncertain of a lot of things. He was really the first person to kind of exert the fact that he believed that the president should control foreign policy, and it's kind of stuck ever since. The president is now the main person in charge. That is an example of a presidential power that has not been explicitly stated in the Constitution, but it's one of the supposedly implied powers that the president can have if needed. In this case, it is needed. The president acts as not only as the main dictator of America's foreign policy, but he also acts as the face of America abroad. He acts as the representation of America to other countries. Or she, if we ever get a she. Now, and term limits is another thing. As the Constitution says that a presidential term is 4 years. Now, until 1951, a president had no limit on his terms. He could run for re-election multiple times for more and more terms, and there was really no term limit. But the traditional was 2 terms, which was a precedent set by George Washington. And it just kind of became a tradition until we had Franklin Roosevelt who was elected in 1933, and he was elected to 4 terms and died during his fourth in 1945. After this, and just a couple years later, in 1951, Congress officially ratified uh, the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which officially limits a president to, at a max, he can have 2 4-year terms, or a maximum that a president can serve is 8 years. Now, a president can be removed from office in certain circumstances if they're committing crimes while they are in office that have endangered certain people or has endangered the country. They can be removed from office, and this is done through a process known as impeachment. Now, I'm not really going to get the gist here, but impeachment is basically you accuse the president of a crime, you formally hold a vote whether or not to charge him with that crime, and then you hold a trial in the Senate. The official charges are brought up by the House of Representatives, and then the trial is held in the Senate, which is presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and then depending on what that trial votes, in the Senate will basically determine whether or not a president is convicted as guilty or innocent. Now, a president, just to keep in mind here, not that many presidents have been impeached. We've only had, let me think here, 1, 2, 3, and most people think of a fourth. If we're talking here, the 3 right off the top of my head. Andrew Johnson was our first one to be impeached. We had him back in 1867. In 1990, what would be the year here? 1998, I guess we could say. I think was the year. I did a video on it. I should know it. We had Bill Clinton was impeached, and then in 20. See here, yeah, just this year actually in 2020 or 20. Yeah, actually, it was the vote was done last year in December. So 2019, we had Donald J. Trump got impeached. So we've had 3. We've had Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump have been impeached. And then some people mistakenly say that Richard Nixon was impeached in 1974. However, he was never actually impeached as he resigned from the presidency before that could happen. But had he stayed in office, he was going to get impeached and removed. I guarantee it. And we kind of covered Watergate in one of our previous videos as well. So that is the whole thing with impeachment. That's basically a case that if a president becomes abusive of his power and he becomes a threat, and they kind of deem that we need to remove him. Now, many presidents over the years have expanded on the president's authority to do certain things, and it is a continuously evolving job. It's not stayed the same as what the Constitution dictates. The Constitution is kind of loose over what the president's job responsibilities are. It implies a few, but it also leaves open that there are more that it just doesn't state. And over the years, many presidents have kind of expanded on this thing, on the presidential power, and claimed that they could do this. For example, Thomas Jefferson was the first president that dictated that the um, president that Thomas Jefferson was the first president to dictate that the president is responsible for acquiring new territory for the United States. That is done with the president. He inquired because he could do it. And Theodore Roosevelt was the president that kind of started breaking up the big trust monopolies that were being held in the big business world back in the early 1900s. And when asked whether or not it was constitutional that he was doing so, Theodore Roosevelt put it very bluntly, and he put it very plainly, something that I actually kind of like his little saying. And Theodore Roosevelt was known to actually ask him, he's like, well, let me read the Constitution here. I don't see where it says I can't do it. And that he was kind of implying that if unless the Constitution specifically says I cannot do it, I'm going to take it as I can do it. Which at the time was a much needed thing. Big business was a big thing. And we'll get to that when we eventually talk about Theodore Roosevelt, who personally is probably one of my more favorite presidents due to his demeanor that he was not afraid to get job done that he felt was needed, even if it went against his own party. He ticked his own party off, and he was a Republican. But anyway, president, as we let's just kind of iterate here, the president's job is continuously evolving. The responsibilities and duties of a president are continuously expanding as the decades go on. Now, as of today, there have been a total of 45 presidents, and as we mentioned, give or take what you want to believe, but according to fact sources that I have so far, we are projected to have a 46 in January. But anyway, that is basically just a small little preview here. I don't want to. I know there's probably more powers, but I just wanted to cover some of the basic ones here of what the president is actually responsible for. So we wanted to go ahead and get that covered. So that will basically end this. Now we will have our first actual video on a president either at the end of this here and at the end of this week or next week before Thanksgiving, and that will be on, of course, our very first president, George Washington. Hopefully, we're going to get through all these presidents within a year. I hopefully within 6 months, but we'll see what happens. So I want to go ahead here, and I think that we'll end it for right now. If you have any questions about anything with this video or any of the others, or about the presidency right here, as we're talking about now, feel free to put any questions you have in the comment section, and I will be glad to answer them if I can. So do not feel afraid to put them in there and ask about it. I will also provide here, as since we're really talking about it, I will provide a link in the video description of a video that I found of the president. It's a kind of a song about the presidents. It was last updated in 2010, so it only goes up to President Obama. It does not include Trump yet, since it hasn't been updated in about 10 years. But it's kind of a song. It's a little song that some YouTube channel made about the presidents, how to goes through them all in order, how to kind of remember their numbers and what maybe name something that each one of them did. I found it was pretty catchy, and if you memorize it, I'm pretty sure you could actually memorize quite a few of these presidents just to kind of start out before we really go through this. So I will provide the link to that video in the video description. So as always, if you are liking this, if you like this video, if you are liking the other videos, do feel free to hit the subscribe button and like the video if you do, or like any of the others. That's up to you. So as always, like, subscribe, leave any comments in the section below. Still leave any ideas if you got any. I'm just kind of dictating here on my own here, but I will more than gladly put it on hold if we get an actual suggestion. So I guess that basically concludes it for this video. And then before we go, in case you don't know your presidents, which many people do not, and it irritates the crap out of me, right here is probably one of our most famous, if not the best president I think that we've had. He's very common. He's on your pennies. Abraham Lincoln. Our 16th president from 1861 till 1865. Then, of course, we have on your nickels, we have Thomas Jefferson, who was our third president from 1801 to 1809. And then the last coin I have here is, of course, the dime. And here we have Franklin Roosevelt, who was our, let me think here, 32nd president from 1933 until 1945. He was our longest serving president. He was the one that got 4 terms. He was also a fifth cousin to President Theodore Roosevelt. They were distant cousins. So, anyway, that conclude for today. So, as always, stay well. Do not get sick during this pandemic. I know it's kind of spiking everywhere right now, and it's kind of scaring a lot out of me. It's scaring a lot out of my family. It's scaring a lot out of a lot of people. So hopefully everyone continues to stay safe during this pandemic, and we will see you back here hopefully for when we go ahead and do our first of our presidential videos, of which we will cover the magnificent presidency of our very big founding father and first president, George Washington. So have a good rest of your day, and we will hopefully see you back here when the next video comes. God bless you all.